Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today and for your interest in our talk today. We're going to be talking to you about an interdisciplinary systematic review of camera image collection and analysis techniques with consideration for environmental conservation social sciences. Before I dive into that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Jessica Pfeffer. My co-presenter here is Dr. Ryan Sharp. We're both professors in the Applied Park Science Lab at Kansas State University in the Park Management and Conservation program. We're actually presenting on behalf of a team of co-authors at Clemson University, Cole Little, Dr. Bess Perry, and Dr. Matt Brownlee. I'd also like to thank Juliana Rogowski for helping us put this presentation together. So how did we come up with the idea for a systematic literature review about camera image collection and analysis techniques? The research team is, we actually all consider ourselves environmental conservation social scientists, which from here on out I'm going to refer to as ECSS for ease of presentation. But in our own scholarship, we have began using cameras and related image analysis more and more in our work. And we realized that while we're really happy with that work, we can always learn more from other disciplines. And so in an effort to dive into the literature and seek out some advice from other disciplines, we found that there really is lack of cohesive insight on camera methods across disciplines. So we decided to utilize interdisciplinary learning to identify approaches and guiding principles in camera usage across disciplines and specifically within ECSS. So what interdisciplinary learning theory sort of does for us is it provides a framework for understanding how and why cross-disciplinary knowledge can benefit a particular discipline. So we used this theory to really understand camera usage, camera placement techniques, common methods for camera data collection and analysis, both in general across disciplines and specifically within ECSS. So in order to do this, we did use Prisma guidelines to guide our systematic review efforts. For those of you who aren't aware, Prisma essentially lists standards and transparent steps in harvesting, analyzing, and reporting data for systematic literature review purposes. So we stuck really closely to these Prisma guidelines. The one place that we did stray away a little bit is in the final database composition stage, where we qualitatively coded our attributes rather than the typical quantitative analysis. And this made sense for the scope and the purpose of this review. So without harping on Prisma too much, what I am going to do is spend a little bit of time telling you about how we made our decisions and how we conducted our searches. This is really important, as many of you likely know, that the way that we make these decisions really identifies how our results and how our related recommendations come out. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of how we made these decisions before moving forward with results. So we began with an initial query using Booleans, and the phrases that we used were camera, image analysis, and image data. We also had 15 other keywords that we used to sort of hone in on selective pieces, such as Amazon recognition as an analysis approach. We also used the words park and recreation for our focus on ECSS. And this was a broad database search, and then we pared it down and purposefully chose the 3 databases that you see on the screen here. And we did this to catch a breadth of sources, all the way from peer-reviewed journals to theses and dissertations to technical reports and management reports. So we resulted in this stage with over 2,000 documents, so clearly we needed some more refinement there. So our first phase of refinement included title and abstract relevance. So here we had some exclusion and inclusion criteria that are important to consider. One thing that we did choose to exclude in this stage is wildlife and fisheries. And this was because of the high volume and we didn't want to take away from the focus on ECSS. Also, we know that wildlife and fisheries has historically used photographs and images, and so they've conducted reviews in their own field of work already, and so we just didn't want to take away and sort of overshadow the sources pertaining to camera and image data in other disciplines. And so we thought that was important to note. We did include any abstract that was published in a peer-reviewed journal, written in English, and available in full text. So this phase brought us down to 655 sources, which led us to our phase 2 of refinement, where we actually read the full text. And so we broke up all 655 sources among the research team. The 2 first authors on the team did implement intercoder reliability and checked on the work of others. And we used the following eligibility criteria here to decide if we would then include that document in our final database. These criteria include mentioning camera use in research and corresponding image analysis in the title or abstract, describing research from an image data set, and consist of more than just a title and abstract, so an actual full paper. Now this brought us down to 391 sources, which all made it into our final database composition stage. At this stage, we included all 391 sources and captured the information included on the screen here, such as metadata, key study findings related to the topic, key study findings related to camera use and analysis. And then we didn't stop there. We actually coded, this is where we went away from Prisma a little bit, and we coded qualitatively to organize our results for our manuscript and for this presentation. So we coded into the 6 attributes, including research discipline, where the study happened, camera type, camera placement, data collection method, and data analysis method. And Ryan is actually going to jump in here and tell you a subsection of those results.
Great, thank you, Jess. So first, most of the articles that we reviewed were peer-reviewed articles, with the second most frequent being dissertations and theses. And as you can see here, starting at about 2005, we start to see the number of publications, especially for environmental conservation, social science, engineering, technology, and computer science, go up almost exponentially from that time period. Almost all of them go up from our study period in 1995 until 2019. But as you can see, those 3 are far and away the biggest increase. Of interest, the agricultural discipline seemed to be going up in the same rate as those previous 3, but for some reason leveled off. And then it may be worth looking into why that is. Maybe some things changed within that field. The next graph looks at the publication distribution over time. So of the papers that we looked at, 92% of them had some sort of mention about where that camera was placed. This is across all disciplines right now. And as you can see, and perhaps not surprisingly, the number 1 was outdoor fixed. So this is what we probably think of most of the time when we think of cameras and using them for data collection. And the second most was aircrafts and drones. Of course, many of us are familiar with the proliferation of drones in research over the last couple of years. And as you can see, from 2005, 2010 until now, those have gone up quite a bit. The aircrafts, the primary use there was fixed on the wings. So the drones are separate from the aircrafts, and the aircrafts tend to focus on placing cameras on the wings to capture that data. The next one is looking at specifically, the next graph is looking specifically at our discipline of environmental conservation social science. So this is the same graph, but just focusing on our discipline and what we've been doing. And once again, perhaps not surprisingly, outdoor fixed is still far and away the most common way that we capture data using cameras. And again, aircrafts and drones are also increasing for some of the same reasons we just talked about on the previous slide. And one thing I would like to mention is that for conservation, environmental conservation, social science, within that, the publications that were looked at, a lot of the common things that were labeled were like park management, human wildlife interactions, tourism, climate change, environmental education. That kind of gives you a sense for what kind of things that we were seeing when we were doing the analysis, and what environmental conservation social science ended up being as a result of this analysis. The next slide, the table, is looking at basically what I've already said. So if we highlight the first, the environmental conservation social science column, we have a reference at the end of our presentation for the entire paper if you're interested in looking at the rest of this data. But for the conversation we're having today, if we look at the camera placement and we highlight that area, we can see that the number one was outdoor fixed, right? So that was far and away the most common place for the cameras to be placed, with aircrafts being a far distant second. If we highlight the area under camera data collection recommendations, we can see that in the papers, we tried to find places where recommendations were provided for how to use cameras in the future. And not surprisingly, fixed mounted cameras were also recommended for future studies, with moving cameras being recommended second, and also held worn cameras being third. But again, fixed mounted being the predominant one. And then lastly, the camera data analysis recommendations, a lot of the papers that we looked at had some sort of analysis recommendations that they proposed. Now for us, environmental conservation social science, the most prevalent, twice as prevalent as the next closest one, was manual. Now what this could tell us is that manual analysis of photo data, as many of you may be aware, is time consuming, expensive, with the opportunity for error because humans are making those judgments and looking at those pictures. Perhaps this is an opportunity, knowing that this is a predominant method of analyzing camera data, that we could start looking at fields such as computer learning and trying to take out some of that error, trying to be more time conscious of how long it takes to put this data together. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of reflect and look at other disciplines perhaps and how they are using some of their data and how they're analyzing it, and we can learn from them. So now we're going to go back to Jess, and she's going to walk us through some of the conclusions and takeaways from what we found.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan, for running us through those results. That's some interesting stuff. So based on those results and what Ryan just shared, we can see that camera methods over the past have really increased. Camera use and methods have increased over the last 20 years. And relatedly, the proliferation in types and methods for analyzing those images. What we've also seen, however, is that camera data collection and image analysis techniques have largely developed within disciplines, really limiting the ability for that collaboration and interdisciplinary learning, which is likely why we haven't seen this and that we're filling this gap. But that, those results really led us to this recommendation for researchers to really be intentional and specific about documenting study and camera details for other researchers so that we can learn from one another. This would really allow us it would allow us and other researchers to examine camera research outside of your own discipline. If we're documenting those specific recommendations and camera details, then we can better learn from one another. This systematic review and conducting this review really kind of allowed us to do that and reflect on these things. And one recommendation that we've also come up with, which Ryan just alluded to a little bit, is harnessing the capability of digital data sets to examine multiple locations and attributes. So the way that we found cameras often being used within disciplines is, for instance, in park research, we tend to look at one place and one attribute being people or vehicles there at one time, right? In agriculture research, we might look at one plot of land, and if we want to grow corn there, how many corn stalks are there? So that's one attribute. And what we found is that there really is a lot of potential for LiDAR and satellite-based technology to sort of, landscape photographs can be used to analyze many different attributes across disciplines. And so this sort of opens up that conversation to allow those things to begin to happen. In terms of image analysis, we came out with some recommendations here as well. So while every single resource that we found really did tell us their image analysis technique, whether it be automated, geospatial, manual, LiDAR, for example, only about a third of those sources actually provided recommendations for how to do that. And so this really led us to this recommendation that researchers list and provide critical analysis of image analysis methods. This is really important when we're trying to learn from one another. Once again, based on the previous slide, very similar in terms of if we document these things, then we can allow ourselves and other researchers to examine image analysis techniques beyond those typically utilized in our discipline. And this leads us to another recommendation that, because cameras and image analysis really have grown within disciplines, there is a need to standardize guidelines for certain analysis techniques. If we're going to continue to manually code our photographs, like what Ryan was talking about previously, we need to standardize that process, right? Or we need to move forward and learn from other disciplines in terms of the technology being used. So the standardization within camera and image analysis is extremely important. And based on this review, we feel that ECSS can really be a leader in that standardization of camera usage with guidance from other disciplines. We feel that we can do that based on the fact that ECSS has really used and documented camera usage quite a bit more than other disciplines. But we think that we can do better. And some recommendations to do that would be, one might be to create a method for calculating and reporting the distance between the camera and the attributes of interest. This is important, for instance, in wildlife studies where we're interested in how close people are getting to the species that they're looking at, for example. And this could be an interdisciplinary contribution for standardization of camera use and analysis. We also think that a review could be conducted of analysis strategies for images posted on online platforms. So ECSS as a field has done really well at using social media, using the metadata to estimate visitor use. But something like this could really streamline analysis, particularly the development of a program that would reduce the burden of manual analysis, which is something else Ryan was just referring to. And it would allow for more images to be included in that analysis. So, thus far studies on social media images really mostly involve the geotagged image and maybe some captions rather than the actual image. We also think that participated generated image data should be examined independently. We considered including this within our own review, but because the data collection strategy is uniquely and intentionally less under the control of the researcher and more under the control of the participant, we feel it's important to treat that independently. So these are ideas for some future research to allow ECSS to really step into the position of becoming a leader in the standardization of camera usage. So that is all we have for you today. We do have our reference listed at the bottom of the screen here. If you're interested in looking at that, it's published in Data. We also provided our emails. If you have any questions for us at all, please contact either Ryan or myself. And otherwise, we look forward to hearing from you in the live Q&A session. Thank you.